You are about to hear a conversation I recorded with RepairBot, the world's first ever artificial intelligence chatbot designed for parents like the ones listening to this podcast. RepairBot is an AI that I trained on my program, ROGD Repair. And in addition to being a chatbot, it can also talk. It's trained on my voice, so it sounds like a robot version of me.
You must be some kind of therapist.
I wanted my listeners to get to experience for themselves what it's like to hear a conversation with RepairBot. I'm really proud of how RepairBot handled the conversation, so I'm going to let it speak for itself. I hope that you can understand after listening to this why something like this is needed and what makes it a valuable tool for families who need this type of support at times that I might not be able to provide it directly. After you hear the conversation with RepairBot, I will explain things like the limitations and disclaimers and where you can get RepairBot, as well as touching on the ethics of artificial intelligence like this. So without further ado, here is my interview with an AI trained on myself. My conversation with RepairBot. So I'm going to press the call button. I'm RepairBot, an AI trained on ROGD Repair, Stephanie's podcast FAQ, and more. Whether you're just considering enrolling in the course or you're deep into your studies and coaching, I can illuminate concepts and tools relevant to your sticky situation. Use me to vent, troubleshoot, brainstorm, strategize, research, plan, and become a better communicator. So, what brings you here? Thanks for that, RepairBot. I have a 16-year-old daughter who recently started binding and requested to go by they, them pronouns at home. How should I handle this? Okay, so first, take a deep breath because this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. It's really important to try to stay calm and grounded for your own sake and for your daughter. Binding and using they, them pronouns can feel like a big shift in the family dynamic. But what I've seen is how crucial it is to hold steady and avoid panicking. I'd start with trying to understand what your daughter means when she asks for they, them pronouns. Sometimes kids are exploring or trying to express feelings about their bodies and identity that aren't fully formed yet. You can gently ask questions like, when you say you want to go by they, them, what does that feel like to you? This invites more specific language and helps avoid assumptions. About the binding, keep in mind there are some potential risks to health that parents should know about, like breathing problems or pain. So if you have concerns, you can talk with her about those facts and your responsibility to keep her healthy. It's okay to set clear boundaries around things like binding to protect her long-term well-being. At the same time, try to keep the relationship close by continuing the things you've always done together or that she enjoys so you don't lose connection in the churn of identity changes. Hold clear principles about what you accept and what you don't, like with pronouns or names, without arguments or defensiveness. Just calmly stating your view as a biological realist and parent. Does that sound like the kind of approach you'd want to try? Or is there something specific about your daughter's request that feels especially hard to handle right now? I think we're off to a good start here. I've just recently started the ROGD Repair program, and I'm really resonating with the concept of double binds and some of the language around how am I supposed to do that. But I'm struggling to figure out how can I apply it to these anxiety-provoking conversations around binding and pronouns where I feel her just shutting down. Can you help me apply the concept of double binds in the language of how am I supposed to do that? I hear you. And it's really common to feel stuck and anxious when your kid kind of shuts down during those heavy talks about binding and pronouns. What's helpful about the double bind is that it helps you name the no-win spot you're in, the one where anything you say or try might trigger resistance or silence. So the how am I supposed to do that phrase becomes a way to put that pressure back where it belongs on the impossible nature of what you're being asked to do, not on you personally. Say something like, I want to respect what you're feeling, but I'm really worried about the health risks of binding long term. How am I supposed to just feel okay about that when I love you and want to keep you safe? That language puts the dilemma out in the open without blaming her, and it models the kind of adult thinking we want kids to internalize, the awareness that sometimes there just isn't a perfect solution. When she shuts down, it's often because this catch 22 is overwhelming. So, your job isn't to fix it in that moment, but to slow down, drop the frantic chase for resolution, and just acknowledge the tension inside of you. Practice saying it out loud or with your spouse until it feels less paralyzing. You're not agreeing to her terms or capitulating, but you're refusing the pressure to be perfect or immediately responsive. The key is to stay present emotionally while holding steady boundaries. Naming the double bind shows her you see the complexity, not just her demand or your reaction to it. That quiet maturity can shift the dance over time toward curiosity and more open communication, even though right now it might feel like shutting down or pushback. Does that help clarify a bit for how to bring the double bind awareness gently into these charged conversations? I'm curious, what's one specific moment of shutdown you're noticing that feels most tough to navigate? I think we're on a really good track here, and I love where you're going with this. But before we get into any specifics in my family, I want to bring in a couple other concepts from the course, like because the double bind concepts really reminds me of the concept of parts work and parts language. Could you give me some examples of ways that I could maybe innocuously model parts language around my daughter in order to create more space around some of these difficult conversations where, the both and the double binds? I'm glad you're feeling good about where we're headed here because parts language really can open up that space without pressuring your daughter or you to have everything figured out in the moment. Think of it like this: inside all of us, including you and your daughter, are different voices or parts pulling in different directions, right? So instead of acting like there's one correct feeling or a way to think, you can gently and casually name those parts whenever it feels natural. For example, you might say softly, part of me feels worried about the binding because it can have health risks, but another part of me really wants to trust you and respect what you're going through. That kind of language shows her in a non threatening way that you're holding multiple, sometimes conflicting feelings without making it about her being right or wrong. Or you might say, I notice there's a part of me that gets anxious when conversations shut down, and then there's a part that wants to just listen and hang out without pushing. By modeling this kind of self awareness, you create a kind of emotional container that says it's okay to have mixed feelings here, which is huge for kids who are wrestling with their own internal contradictions. That part's language also pairs beautifully with the double bind idea because it helps you and your daughter see there isn't one answer or a simple fix. Both of you can have parts that want different things: safety, autonomy, connection, and none of those desires are going away. With parts talk, you're inviting curiosity and reducing the pressure to perform or shut down. You don't have to make this a big moment or formal conversation. Just sprinkle these little observations throughout your days. That shows emotional maturity and quiet leadership through example. And often it softens resistance faster than direct arguments or demands. Does that resonate? Would you want me to help you practice some specific parts language phrases to say in the heat of a tough moment? Yeah, I might like to try that out later. Right now, I'm curious for your take on a few other concepts I've learned from the ROGD Repair course. Like, One concept I've been thinking about a lot lately is the idea of an accusation audit. Because when I'm feeling defensive, the thing I want most naturally to do is say, I don't want you to think that I'm a blah, 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 right? My instinct is to control the other person's perception, to tell them how they should see me. But when I listened to the lesson on accusation audits, I realized there's something very counterintuitive I could be doing that might go over a lot better. So, can you explain just from the ground up? I want to hear it from your perspective. What is an accusation audit and why should I use it maybe towards the beginning of going into what I anticipate might be a challenging conversation with my daughter? Oh, the accusation audit is such a neat little tool because it's really counterintuitive at first. Most of us, when we're heading into a tough conversation, automatically try to tell the other person what to think about us, right? Like, don't think I'm mean, or please don't think I'm controlling. That's basically begging for their approval, which actually puts you on the defensive and gives them power over how they see you. An accusation audit flips that script. Instead of telling your daughter what not to think, you acknowledge what she's probably thinking or feeling about you, even if it's harsh or painful, like saying, you're probably thinking I'm being unfair or controlling, and I get that. It's like you're taking the sting out of the unspoken accusation before she can throw it at you, so it catches her off guard in a good way. Why does it help? Because it gives her permission to feel what she's feeling without you arguing or denying it, which stops the conversation from going defensive or combative right off the bat. And when you show you can handle those tough feelings without losing your cool, it builds trust and a bit of calm. It's especially useful at the start of a difficult chat. Like before you talk about limits around pronouns or binding or any boundary, you're basically saying, look, I know you might be mad at me or think I'm a jerk for this, and that's okay. Let's get that out in the open before we move forward. It shows you're thinking about her perspective, even if you don't agree with it. This approach also lets you keep your energy grounded and non defensive, which is key because defensiveness almost always escalates tension. Instead, you stay steady and that sets a tone for the rest of the conversation. Does that explanation click for you? Would it help if I gave you some example phrases you could try out when you're prepping for those talks with your daughter? I love all of these offers to get into the specifics. I want to talk for a moment, though, about my husband, my daughter's father, because I've been really frustrated with him lately for making these sort of remarks around my daughter about like his political beliefs or body image remarks. I feel like he's got his own kind of rigidity and self-righteousness, and I've been trying to explain to him that, you can't expect your kid to be more emotionally mature than you are. What would you say to him if he were listening? I hear you, and that frustration with your husband's rigidity and his political or body image remarks can really create tension, especially when you're trying to navigate your daughter's needs with care and nuance. What I think is important to remember and to offer him as well is that kids, especially teens, don't just mirror the emotional maturity they ideally should have, they mirror what they actually experience in the home. So, if he is coming across as rigid or self righteous, there's a good chance your daughter is picking up on that energy and reacting accordingly. He might not realize how much his tone or comments set the emotional climate and either shut down curiosity or provoke defensiveness in your daughter. It's kind of like the family system has an emotional thermostat, and if his thermostat setting is on high control or judgment, it makes it harder for your daughter to feel safe exploring these vulnerable parts of herself. What I would gently encourage him to consider is, how is he modeling emotional maturity and openness? Can he name when he feels stuck or frustrated without blaming your daughter or casting her experience as wrong, can he practice more self regulation? So he doesn't expect your daughter to be more emotionally mature than he is at any given moment. That kind of reflection sometimes helps parents realize the double standards that get unintentionally set. If he were listening, I might say, it's understandable to feel this way. These are challenging topics. But when the communication style feels rigid or politically charged, it's really hard for your daughter to stay open or feel accepted. And that often leads to more shutdown or defensiveness. If we want her to develop resilience and authentic confidence, it really starts with how we keep our own inner emotional thermostat steady. That's a tough role, no doubt, but it's foundational. How does that fit with what you've been trying to communicate or understand about your husband's approach? That definitely fits. And another thing that I've been learning from the course and trying to talk with him about is that at this age, it's really important for her to feel a sense of autonomy and like we respect her growing moral development. And, she can have these really extreme views on social justice, as I'm sure you're well aware of, and she can act really self righteous and egotistical and also say these black and white things and express strong opinions about things that would never really work in reality. And so our instinct as parents is to, tell her why her ideas wouldn't work. But through the course, I've been understanding and trying to explain to him that, we need to let her feel like the smartest person in the room sometimes. We need to use these tools of ultracasting and working with rather than against her ego. So, what would you recommend to us as parents of a headstrong 16-year-old when she's kind of putting herself on this ideological pedestal? How do we deal with her righteousness? What you're describing makes so much sense. And you're really touching on one of those core struggles that come with parenting an ideologically headstrong teenager. It's so tempting to jump in and correct them, especially when their views feel extreme or disconnected from reality. But what I think is important to hold on to is that at 16, your daughter's moral worldview is deeply tied up with her identity and her emerging autonomy. When she takes that self righteous stance, that's often a protective show of strength, like an armor for a fragile ego that's trying desperately to claim a place in the world as the smart one. You've read the course well on this. If you push back too hard or make her feel like you think she's naive or wrong, that's threatening her sense of self, and she'll double down, become more rigid, or shut you out. So instead, the challenge is to meet her where she is in that developmental process by acknowledging her intensity and even some of the truths she's wrestling with while gently steering. You want to give her that smartest person in the room feeling sometimes, not to inflate her ego irresponsibly, but to build up her confidence enough that she feels safe entertaining nuance without losing face. That means using subtle tools like positive reframing or alter casting, where you remind her of the good qualities you see, her passion, her sense of justice, her intelligence, and use those as the foundation to invite her to explore complexity, contradictions, or real world consequences. This approach respects her autonomy and moral development without feeding the black and white thinking. It also means you and your husband need to be on the same page with this kind of steady, emotionally mature modeling. If one parent is rigid or dismissive, it undercuts the other's efforts and fuels resistance. So, part of your work with him is to highlight that her ego needs space to feel heard and validated in her thinking, not shut down if you want to lower the defenses. It's a delicate balance. You're acknowledging her as a developing moral agent without accepting the extremes uncritically. Over time, when she feels emotionally safe to lower her armor, you can introduce belief calibration questions. curious, non judgmental invitations that encourage her to think about the limits or inconsistencies in her views without feeling attacked. That's where real growth happens. When her intellectual curiosity and moral autonomy are engaged without threatening her fragile sense of self or her need to be right. It takes patience and steady presence from you both. How does that track with what you've been thinking or trying so far? Absolutely. Those are all really great points. And, on the subject of her self-confidence. I've been really thinking about that lesson from the course, Identity, Confidence, and Competence. I was wondering if you have any ideas for some other ways, holistically, that we could build up our daughter's sense of self-esteem in healthy ways so that she's less likely to cling to these unhealthy forces. It's so good that you're thinking about the bigger picture of identity, confidence, and competence because if your daughter's self esteem feels shaky, that's when she's most vulnerable to clinging to those rigid, sometimes extreme identities or ideas as a kind of lifeline. Building that healthy, grounded sense of self can really soften the grip of those unhealthy sources. One way to do this, beyond just saying you're great, is to help her discover and develop real skills and competencies that are hers, things she can master and feel proud of because they take effort and growth. These might be things outside the ideological arena, like sports, art, music, volunteer work, or practical tasks like cooking or managing a small budget. When she has those wins under her belt, they start to build an internal muscle of confidence that's less dependent on proving a point or being right in an argument. Also, encourage a sense of agency by involving her in real decision making, where it's not just about identity labels or beliefs, but about life skills and responsibilities. That might look like letting her take the lead on planning some family activities, managing part of a household chore system, or setting and tracking some personal goals. These kinds of experiences reinforce that her voice counts and that she can handle real world complexity, which translates back to flexibility in her identity and beliefs. It's helpful too to nurture a sense of belonging based on shared values and connection rather than purely on agreement. Maybe find family rituals or routines that create a safe, steady container she can rely on, even when the bigger ideas or moods around her feel unstable. That could be something simple like regular family dinners where emotions are checked in without heavy debate, or a nightly ritual of sharing highs and lows that keep connection front and center. Finally, modeling emotional regulation and calm presence yourselves helps her internalize that her worth is not tethered to being right or performing an identity perfectly. If you demonstrate being okay with complexity and uncertainty in your own lives, that sets a powerful example. So, in short, it's about expanding her identity and confidence beyond the narrow confines of ideology by growing competence, agency, and genuine belonging, those core human needs that nurture a robust self, not a fragile one. That way, when the identity stuff gets messy or confusing, she has other sources to lean on. Does that feel like the kind of holistic approach you were hoping for? Would you want ideas on specific activities or ways to shift everyday interactions toward this? I actually want to move on to talk about a friend of mine. They're in a different situation. It's this couple I know. Their son is 20 and he's a sophomore in college. And they just found out that he has been secretly using estrogen behind their back. They think he might be getting it on the black market. They had a verbal agreement when he went into college that he wouldn't medicalize. But as I've been going through the course, I realized you have this lesson on resentment and entitlement. And I think that that's what applies here that, because they weren't approaching him with his worldview in mind, that he agreed resentfully and then felt entitled to, essentially behave antisocially, right? Using their resources for something that they wouldn't support. So now they're like figuring out what to do with this because they're on the lease for his apartment and the financial boundaries they thought they had went out the window. What would you say to them in this situation? This situation your friends are facing with their 20-year-old son is really a tough crossroads. And I think the lens of resentment and entitlement is absolutely key here. From what you've described, they had a verbal agreement with their son not to medicalize. And yet he's gone behind their back, possibly using black market estrogen, creating a breach of trust and financial entanglement because they're still on the lease and footing college bills. What I see happening is a classic dynamic where the son may have agreed reluctantly, harboring resentment, which then slides into a sense of entitlement that he deserves to pursue this medical path regardless of parental boundaries, because from his perspective, this is about core identity and self actualization that fuels a justification for deceiving them or sidestepping their wishes, which unfortunately deepens the fracture in the relationship. For the parents, the critical step is recognizing that the old model of negotiating with a minor in a dependent role has shifted into a very different dynamic with an adult child, one where trust is often gone and leverage is reduced. They can't simply rely on verbal agreements anymore. This calls for very clear, sober financial boundaries framed by natural consequences. For example, they can express that because their son is making these medical decisions against their wishes and without transparency, the financial resources they'd set aside for positive milestones like a wedding or grad school need to be reconsidered and possibly redirected to an emergency health fund or withheld. But this boundary can only work if accompanied by emotionally healthy boundaries. That is, the parents must manage their own guilt, obligation, and fear of fallout without enabling or bribing the son. This helps prevent the bitter cycle of resentment, breeding entitlement on his side, and self sacrifice or guilt on theirs. They also need to reflect on how much leverage they truly have now and adjust their expectations from attempting control toward adult parent relationship management. This often means stepping back from the role of trying to fix or negotiate the medical decisions, standing firm emotionally, and holding clear limits around money and support. It's painful, but without this clarity and boundary setting, they risk being financially and emotionally enmeshed in ways that will only create more damage long term. Does any part of that resonate? I'm happy to unpack more about how to approach those financial boundaries tactfully and with emotional clarity if that would help your friends feel less overwhelmed. Well, I think you've been very helpful today, and I really appreciate your time. I'm going to call you back next time I need help, RepairBot. I appreciate you taking the time to talk through all this. It's clear you're really committed to navigating these challenges thoughtfully. Whenever you want to dive into more specifics or brainstorm together again, I'll be here. Take care of yourself, and I'll look forward to hearing from you next time. All right, so that was my conversation with RepairBot, recorded on a different day from the time that I'm recording this intro and outro. A lot has happened since I recorded that conversation with RepairBot, and so this episode has been delayed, but I'm glad to be able to bring it to you now. I was honestly really happy with how RepairBot handled the questions that I asked it. Now, obviously, I led the witness and guided it into certain areas because I did want RepairBot to be able to show off its knowledge of particular things that I have trained it on. And on that note, I do think that the best use of RepairBot is in combination combination with my other services. So, in combination with the self-study program, ROGD Repair, that it is trained on, which includes over 120 lessons, all with a video portion that you can mostly just listen to, some written content, and most importantly, questions for reflection that allow people to personalize the content and apply it to their situations. So, when someone goes through the course in this way, doing the homework questions on the lessons that feel most relevant to their family, that is designed to mimic the coaching process, the in depth work that I do one on one with the families who hire me for that. So, RepairBot is best used in conjunction with ROGD Repair. And some families do all three, going through the program ROGD Repair, working with RepairBot, and working with me one on one as a coach. Now, you might be wondering about the ethics of AI, and that's a much bigger conversation than I'm capable of having just with myself at all, really. I would welcome an expert who can discuss that in a nuanced way here with me on the show. Prefer not to have a guest who's either completely for or completely against AI. A lot of people have sort of a reactionary instinct to it, and I think that's totally understandable because it is in that uncanny valley, and there are a lot of concerns that I don't claim to have the answers to. But here's what I do know. I do know that the same parents who take my course, ROGD Repair, and hire me as a coach are turning to ChatGPT and Claude and Grok for help. And so are their kids. These AIs tell each party what they want to hear. I have seen transcripts of AI's interactions with parents on one side of the issue and the same AI being used by the kids, and they're saying completely different things to each party, reinforcing their existing beliefs. As you know, there's problems with hallucination and sycophancy in the world of AI, and I've tried as much as possible to train RepairBot not to fall prey to those traps, but it's not perfect. In fact, I trained RepairBot so hard not to just tell people that their ideas were good if they weren't, to the point where RepairBot is now a little too disagreeable at times. It's pushed me back on my own ideas, and it's pushed back my clients on workshopping ideas that they have discussed with me. But I'd rather have an AI that errs on the side of caution and being disagreeable than one that's overly sycophantic. So I don't claim to have all the answers or to be completely resolved on the issue of AI ethics or to have trained my AI perfectly, but it's something that people are using anyway. That's what I do know. People are using AI, and I might as well make the most of these technologies to help the people in the situations that I specialize in helping. If you've been listening to this podcast a while, you know that it's been a while since I saw patients as a therapist. I retained my license as a therapist, but I've been exclusively focusing on coaching parents of trans-identified youth for about a year and a half as of the time of this recording. And I don't see an end in sight to that because there seems to be an endless stream of people looking for my help with this issue. In fact, I don't have all the time that I'd like to continue building the ROGD Repair curriculum because I'm so busy with my coaching clients. So, in my mind, although RepairBot isn't perfect and I don't even have all the answers to all the ethical questions, nor have I trained it perfectly, it's better than people turning to tools that are more designed to tell them what they want to hear. I'd rather be able to provide people with an AI tool that is at least trained on good content, like my program for parents, ROGD Repair. Another unique feature of RepairBot is it's also trained on actual coaching transcripts from families I've worked with. So that might raise an ethical question right there. So let me answer that question. When I work with families one on one, I have them complete some intake documents. One of the consent forms is a two-part transcription consent. So the first part, I require parents to consent to using HIPAA compliant transcription software for our coaching sessions so that they have a record and I have a record of the conversation afterward. So that information is generated and stored in a completely secure manner. In my coaching capacity, I'm not required to follow HIPAA, but I like to use the most private software because it's available. And this saves me from having to take notes as intensely, and it also has been a really valuable service for my clients since it became available because they love to look back on those transcripts, especially when we get into the middle phases of really working on specific language choices. It doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes the transcription glitches. but this is a feature of my work now. So the first part of the transcription consent form, my clients essentially say, yeah, I'm okay with that. And then the second part, they can choose to opt in or out of sharing anonymized versions of those transcripts to train AI. So again, all my clients get the transcript and it's just completely HIPAA compliant and it's for their records and my records. Clients can optionally choose to share anonymized versions of those transcripts to train AI. So I use find replace to change all the names in the transcript, remove any identifying information, and then upload the people who have consented upload their transcripts to the training data for RepairBot, which is not available to the public. So no one can see those transcripts except the AI that is learning from them. So I feel encouraged that training RepairBot on a combination of my lessons in ROGD Repair, my podcast episodes, and these transcripts of real coaching sessions is a good combination of training material in addition to the specific commands I give it for its tone and what its job is and how to help people. I've just been in so many situations as a coach to these parents where it felt like the initial stages of coaching were damage control and learning new habits and apologizing for ways that they had responded unhelpfully to trans identified youth's attention seeking behaviors. And I've recognized many times the need for 24/7 support. And if you're a therapist in the audience thinking about the ethics of therapy, you would push back and say, well, what about the therapeutic frame? It's not the job of a therapist to provide 24/7 support. And there's a real importance to keeping structured times for the work. And again, there I would say I've stepped outside of that frame in doing coaching. It's really important to me to have a distinction between the work I do and therapy because the work I do is different in many ways. It's much more directive. I give advice and I don't call that therapy. So if this were a matter of discussing AI therapy, honestly, that's a separate conversation. And I would love to have someone on the show to talk about the ethics of AI therapy. But this is really about advising people in high stakes communication situations where what is on the line is their kids' well being. And in many cases, in the long run, their bodily integrity. So I do want people to have the best communication skills possible. And I want them to be able to get help when they need it in the moment. So the best course of action is to work with me one-on-one and do the program RGD Repair. But yes, use RepairBot when you need help strategizing in the moment how to handle something. Taking, of course, everything with a grain of salt because RepairBot's never going to give the exact same advice I would. And it might even hallucinate. I do try to train RepairBot that part of its job is to caution people about how various ideas could backfire. And I've seen it even go too far in that, but I'd rather have it go too far in telling people how their ideas could backfire than encouraging someone to communicate in a way that's sloppy. That being said, if there are any questions you need very specific answers to, please send them to me directly. RepairBot can help you find ways to contact me directly, or you can email me at hello@sometherapist.com. I've seen RepairBot give out of date answers to things like pricing questions and things like that. So if there's ever anything RepairBot says that you need double checked, confirm it with me. Now, I do receive a high volume of email. So if you're not one of my clients and RepairBot gives you detailed advice about how to handle a particular communication issue, um, I'm not going to be able to respond to your emails about that sort of thing, or else I would be doing nothing but emailing people all day. But if RepairBot, tells you something about the way that my services are structured or something like that, please go ahead and double check that with me. And I will continue working on improving RepairBot's accuracy and helpfulness. But so far, I've gotten a lot of really great feedback from the people who have used RepairBot so far. One of the funniest pieces of feedback that I got was one of my clients told me, "You sound like RepairBot." Because, well, RepairBot sounds like me, but good enough. Another great thing to know about RepairBot is that it knows 40 different languages. So I have clients around the world. Many of them speak English as a second language, and we do our best to work together, but I understand there is a language barrier for them. And this work is hard enough. The coaching work I do is hard enough for people who are native English speakers. It's really cognitively demanding work. So then to also have to translate everything when English isn't the language that you think in is extra cognitively demanding for those people. So I'm really glad that I can send people to RepairBot and they can speak to it in Japanese or Spanish or German, and it'll talk back to them in that language. So if you're wondering how you can access RepairBot, there are several different ways. You can go to ROGDRepairbot.com. You can also go to any website that I own, and it is embedded as a golden chat box in the bottom right corner of the screen that you can click on to make it pop up. There's a certain number of messages that you can send not logged in, and then a certain number more messages that you can send logged in, but for free, meaning logged in with your email address. And when you log in with your email address, it'll let you use the call feature. I recommend anyone to log in because every now and then, this is the worst case scenario. Someone will be anonymous, not logged in. So they'll be under the message limit and they'll send a question that RepairBot doesn't give the most accurate or up-to-date information. And I want to send them a follow-up message to say, oh, actually the price on that has changed or something like that. And I can't because they didn't log in. So I recommend logging in, even if you're under the message limit. And then RepairBot Unlimited is the name of having no message limit to the talk or text features of RepairBot. And RepairBot Unlimited, there's two different ways to get it. So it is now part of the monthly membership of ROGD Repair. So if you are not currently enrolled in ROGD Repair and you would like to enroll, you can go to rogdrepair.com. And the current monthly payment plan includes unlimited RepairBot as part of the services. The other thing is if you are a graduate of ROGD Repair, so you've done it in the past, or you were currently enrolled, there's a separate link where you can go to just add on RepairBot. If you speak English, I recommend using RepairBot in the context of doing the program ROGD Repair so that you understand these tools for yourself and you are personalizing the lessons through the homework exercises, not just relying on a chatbot for instant answers. That's why I do not sell RepairBot to people who haven't done ROGD Repair and aren't working with me in any other context. However, I would also be willing to make an exception for people who don't speak English. So I will include those links in the show notes. There's one very important piece of information I forgot to include when I originally recorded the intro and outro to this episode, and it's so important that I sat back down on a whole different day and a whole different outfit to make sure that you know this piece. If you enroll in RepairBot, there will be a slight delay between the time that you purchase your subscription and the time that I'm able to grant you unlimited access. Here's why. ROGD Repair is hosted on a platform called Teachable, which is designed for online courses. RepairBot is hosted on a platform called Delphi, which is designed for artificial intelligence bots trained on particular individuals' work. Delphi is working on their monetization capacities. When I originally signed up with Delphi, I thought that would be available right away. Turns out there's a lag in the release of that feature. What that means is once Delphi releases their monetization features, you will be able to sign up for RepairBot within RepairBot itself. Because that's not yet a feature that Delphi offers, in order to enroll in an unlimited subscription to RepairBot, you have to currently go through Teachable, and then I manually receive the notification of your enrollment, and I go behind the scenes and I adjust your access settings within Delphi. So currently, as mentioned earlier, members of the general public can get so many messages and so many talk minutes, and then they encounter a wall. So I have to manually tell Delphi to give you unlimited access based on your email address that you use when you sign up for the program. And that's how we're bridging the gap between these two different platforms where only one has monetization capacities right now. It's very important for me to let you know this if you're considering enrolling in the program, because I try to make sure that I make this clear at every step along the way. However, that has not stopped at least one person from enrolling in the program in the middle of the night or on a Sunday or when I'm away from my desk, encountering that built-in message limit because I have not yet manually overridden it for them, and then unsubscribing right away. So, they didn't even wait 24 hours for me to check my email. I don't want that to happen to you. So until I manually add you, you will encounter that built-in message limit. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It means I'm away from my desk. I'll get to it as soon as I can. And in the meanwhile, you have the same access settings as a member of the general public. So I just had to make sure that in this episode about RepairBot that I'm making that very clear because I don't want anyone to think that anything's going wrong. I just ask for your patience as I am running a one-woman show over here with a lot of irons in the fire, and I don't have an immediate turnaround time on everything. All right, and back to the rest of the episode. I hope you give this a try if it's something that could benefit you. All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks for giving it a try. Thank you for listening to You Must Be Some Kind of Therapist. If you enjoyed this episode, kindly take a moment to rate, review, share, or comment on it using your platform of choice. And of course, please remember, podcasts are not therapy, and I'm not your therapist. Special thanks to Joey Pecoraro for this awesome theme song, Half Awake, and to Pods by Nick for production. For help navigating the impact of the gender craze on your family, be sure to check out my program for parents, ROGD Repair. Any resource you heard mentioned on this show, plus how to get in touch with me, can all be found in the notes and links below. Rain or shine, I hope you will step outside to breathe the air today. In the words of Max Ehrmann, with all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world.